Okay. Well, I will continue to let people in from the waiting room, but I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to everybody to our third week of Munch on This. Just a reminder to keep yourselves muted, and then if you do have questions, go ahead and you can type them into the chat on the bottom, or if you want, you can ask them at the end too. If you're on Facebook Live with us, you can always type your question in on there, and then I can ask that question when we get to the end, where Robbie's ready to take questions. So just a few things I wanted to touch on. We've had really good response from the Munch on This. I want to thank everybody for joining us. And this is kind of what we decided to do in place of our mentor guided workshop that we were supposed to have back in October. So it's been great for being able to reach out to even some people that have not been at our mentor guided workshops and other events in person. So if you're having any technical difficulties, I will do the best I can. The other night we had some gray patches on the screen. I don't know what that was coming from, and we couldn't really do anything to fix it, but hopefully we don't have that tonight. Let's see. We are recording this. And then I did want to let you know that all of the Munch on This series to this point have been loaded on our YouTube channel. So if you missed any of them and want to go back and watch them, they are in, there's a Munch on This category on there that you can go in and you should be able to find all the videos. And I will probably load the one from tonight, either this evening or over the weekend or something. So let me see what else we need to talk about here. I think that's about it. So I'm going to introduce our speaker for tonight. Rob Kramer purchased his ranch near Denbigh in 1987 at the age of 22 and built his current ranching operation from scratch. He now runs a small cow-calf operation with around 100 cows and 50 yearlings and also has 190 sheep. His holistic management focuses include high-density grazing with cattle and sheep, bale grazing, windrow grazing, seeding legumes into tame grass pastures, reducing bluegrass to allow native plants to grow from the seed bank, using sheep to manage leafy spurge, and not calving livestock until May. He is experienced in sheep management and has also worked extensively with electric fencing. Rob says he is focused on trying to improve his operation while operating with minimal inputs. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, Robbie. So if you want to go ahead and share your screen, we'll get started.
Are we there?
Just 1 second. There we go. I see it. So I think we should be good to
go. Okay. Well, welcome from the Denbigh Sandhills. If you don't know where Denbigh's at, there it is, right on Highway 2, halfway between Towner and Granville. I grew up in the big city of Denbigh. There were 7 houses there when I was a kid, down to 3 now. My dad grew up west of Denbigh. He was a diesel mechanic and a welder, 2 genes I did not get. Mom was from Willow City, about 40 miles northeast, and she was a part-time bookkeeper. I really hate bookkeeping, so I didn't get anything from them in there. But the folks owned a block and a half in Denbigh, and we fenced off another block. Not quite an empire, but a start. There was always a few horses around. We had a milk cow, some other critters. I guess my ranching career started when I was 6. Dad bought both me and my older sister the old heifer calves we held home on our laps in the back seat of the old green Plymouth. It took quite a while to build up a herd after getting her bred because she kept having bull calves and we kept eating them. But by the time I was 17, I had a small herd of cows, my own bull, renting a quarter of land, and looking for a ranch. I tried to buy a few places. Thank God I didn't get them because then when I was 22, home became available. I ended up with, that didn't switch, Trish.
Your picture didn't change?
Nope.
Okay, let's see here. Why don't you, let's try closing that one and see what happens. we'll get it going here again. Okay, this is gonna go, oh, no, maybe not. Does yours, does it show you a forward arrow?
No, it's underneath you. There it went. Okay.
Okay, yep, now it's going. Okay, we're good.
Now it's gone.
Yep, you're good. You're good.
Okay. Well, here's my ranch. Like I said, I bought it in 1987. And I bought 9/4 of sand spurge and popple trees. I had a little onto it since then. Let's see, can we switch? There we go. Okay. I hear a lot of people talking about sand. This is the hill on the west side of my yard. It's nothing but a big pile of sand blew up into a dune. Most all these dunes, they all run northwest, southeast, because they're blown up by the wind. Some people think they were formed in the 30s, but there's, you see them oak trees up at the top of the hill. This is a slice off an oak tree. That's about 120 years old in a sandhill oak. There's some at the bottom of the hill that are a couple feet across. I do have somebody coming from the Forest Service. They're going to do some core tests this summer on some of the bigger trees. I'm pretty fortunate that I still have these oaks because most of the oaks in the sandhills were cut for fence posts. I get a lot of my friends talking about that I have a different kind of oak because mine are straight. All they got is these little scrub oaks that run about 14 different directions. That's because they didn't make a post. There's the sand. This hadn't been grazed yet this year, but that's how dry it was. It started to do like that. This is the hill. This is facing west from that hill, where you can't hardly see the rest of the hills for all the trees. Most of them are popples. I guess everybody else calls them aspen, but if you're from Denbigh, they're called a popple. I was visiting with a neighbor of mine who was 95 years old because these trees were not native. And he said the seed blew down out of Saskatchewan in the 30s. Because when it started raining in the late 30s, these trees started popping up all over the place. Pretty fortunate to have these popples. They're good protection. It's nice to have a grove or two. But I got to go back here for a second. But like this quarter here, I call this my Turtle Mountain quarter, not because it has good soil of the Turtle Mountains, because as you can see, it's so full of trees, you can't hardly drive through it. County agent was out this summer. We're doing some forage and water sampling. She grew up near the Turtle Mountains, and I told her what I called it. She kind of laughed. And after we got up there, I said, I kind of think this quarter probably has more trees on it than some counties in the southwest part of the state. After we were up there for a little while, she said, I think you're wrong. And I said, what? She said, I think that quarter has more trees than any two counties in the southwest part of the state. Could be. I'm not going to count them. One more. Okay, this is east of the yard. Still sand, just a lot flatter, little rolling. You get about a half mile down the road there and you start hitting gravelly sand. That makes them big sand hills look pretty productive. It doesn't grow much. No water holding capacity. I guess if you want to do a water infiltration test out there, you better bring a fire truck. The whole place has a pretty high water table. My deepest well is 21 feet. My shallowest is 8. They'll all run 12, 20 gallons a minute. This is low ground. Well, this is actually hog wallows, but I'll talk about low ground. Luckily, I got a bunch of low ground in the place. I'm going to go back to this other map. If I can get there. This whole chunk here, about 2 miles long and going out into other people's land, is all low ground. There's also small chunks of an acre or two all the way around, but this is the big. I'm guessing when the glaciers come through, they took a big gouge out here because there's some glacier pushed up hills about a mile south, and some of them are pure sand. But this is a lot more productive than any other land on the place. The water table's held up pretty high, and it's actually kind of heavier soil. Let's see, I gotta go back again. Okay, these are hog wallows. I guess the first settlers, they call them buffalo wallows. They thought the buffalo, that's where they rolled around and dusted themselves, but it's got nothing to do with hogs or buffalo. This is a little heavier soil, and there's a layer of clay down there that holds the water up a little higher yet. If you're familiar with the cows pugging something up, this is like elephants doing it. These holes are 2 feet across, and some of them are 1.5 feet, 2 feet deep, and then they're pushed up. They never quit moving. The previous owner had this all flattened out 50 years ago or whatever with a scraper, but they just come right back. This actually ain't as bad as it used to be. But one thing about this stuff, it's always green. No matter how dry it is, there's always some moisture here. So it always kind of pulls you in when you're trying to find some hay. Usually go in there a ways till you break something or hit your head on the cab of the tractor. Joe, the previous owner, he broke a tractor in half out there. He always said in McHenry County, in Enema, that's the place to shove the hose. You shouldn't be drinking Trish. I use this for pretty, excuse me, high density grazing. And I run like 120,000 pounds per acre on this stuff. And as dry as this was, this is pretty good regrowth for this year. Every once in a while, I do get a cow boogering up a hip or something out here. This is not a pasture for bulls. I try to use that before I turn the bulls out. Spurge. Previous owner hadn't done squat about spurge, and I always told people when I bought it, I had 2 patches of spurge. One was 800 acres, the other one was a little smaller. She was thick. Come over the hood of my 78 Chevy pickup, and there was a 2 inches between plant. There was hardly no grass here, but I'm guessing that's why a broke 22-year-old was able to buy this place. Previous owner always said he figured there was something spurge was good for, and it is. There's the sheep. I didn't get sheep right away. I should have, but when I bought the place, I worked for the Forest Service, and most of my job was killing things. I sprayed spurge, I sprayed weeds, I sprayed insects, I cut trees down. Typical June day for me was, if I could get my butt out of bed early enough, was try to spray 150 gallons of poison if I keep my piece of crap sprayer going. Then I'd go to work, spray all day if the wind didn't come up. I'd go home, spray out another tank full. I lived in a Tordon and 2,4-D haze. Amazing I'm still alive, and more amazing I don't kill things by peeing on them 20 some odd years later. I tried the flea beetles. They don't survive very well in the sand. I don't know if it's not enough litter. I don't know. And the larvae, they go underneath the plant, and then they'll cut the roots off, but the spurge is down to the water table, so it just grows around them. They're still there, but I see them every once in a while, but they're not much good. My cousins up the road had had sheep about as long as I can remember. And our place is meat on my Turtle Mountain corner, and their side of the fence was pretty clean, not a lot of trees, not a lot of spurge, more grass. Mine was solid trees and spurge, very little grass. But so you know it works. I always figured I'd get sheep, but I wanted to get the fencing done first. Well, you know how that went. So about 20 some years ago, when my cousin Reed called and said they were going to go to Buffalo, South Dakota to buy a herd of sheep, and wonder if I wanted some, I said, yeah. So that fall, I became the proud owner of 100 Ramble Lake ewes. One died the next day. Welcome to the sheep business. I don't know, could have been from the trucking or could have been from the shade, because she probably's never seen this many trees before. But they'd also never seen spurge before. So the next spring after I'd lambed, I had them locked between a little pasture between my house and the corral. And it was the only pasture I had that was woven wired. And them sheep ate everything but spurge. I was going around that pasture, fixing every hole, pushing everybody back in because they were going to stay in there until they ate spurge or died. But eventually they took a bite, and the rest is history. Spurge is about the perfect sheep food, because sheep are such protein hogs. They need a lot higher protein diet than cows do. and they just do real well on spurge. I graze it, I hay it. Uh, Good range sheep or Rambouillet are good range sheep, good wool, but the carcass isn't the greatest. Whatever they're selling nowadays is Rambouillet in the show ring. They're just so big, they don't work. Ewes are supposed to be 150 pounds. They're selling ewes that are 200 and bigger, and the bucks are 400 pounds. I don't know what they are, but it's hard to find a good Rambouillet anymore. But here's a few left. About 15 years ago, I started buying Targhee bucks. Targhee, not only a lot easier to spell, Targhee. Don't ask me to spell Rambouillet. The Targhees were developed in the Targhee National Forest in Idaho. They started with Rambouillet ewes, bred them to Corriedale and Lincoln long wools. They tried to come up with a long, fine wool sheep with a good carcass. And I think they got it. My ewes are around 160 pounds. They wean off 80-pound lambs at a little over 4 months old. They got a 9-pound wool clip of usually pretty high-priced wool, but not this year. Between COVID, China, and whatever else is going on, the wool market kind of crashed. Year before last, I got 220. Year before that, I got 280 a pound. And this year, I was offered $1. It's still sitting in the barn. I hope it comes back, but I'll probably hold it out for 80 cents. I don't know. Most of my fences are 5-wire barbs. It's still a work in progress, but it's working. I've tried some electric with some success, but it's a long ways to go. Sheep will stay in as long as they got spurge. They just love their spurge until what we call the ills of August. Late August, early September, them ewes, they're sick of them lambs beating on them. And they just figure if they go out, get under the fence, the lambs won't follow. Of course, the lambs follow. And they'll just drive you nuts. I know my cousin Kurt said they were looking for a coyote to kill the lamb is probably why they're doing that. But anyways, they this year, because of the drought, I was out of spurge, and then they kept trying to get out and get rid of the lambs. So I ended up weaning pretty early because they were just driving me nuts. And after I weaned them, I put the ewes back up on a pasture that they wouldn't stay in before, and they were fine. They just needed to get rid of the lambs. First year I had sheep, I lambed in a 12 by 16 calf shelter. I would not recommend that. I could bend then, I can't now, but it worked. The next winter, me and some friends of mine, we built a barn. And we had a January about like this one, pretty nice. We finished up the barn. Sheep shear showed up on the 30th of January. It was 15 below. That was the warmest it got for the next month. The sheep also came with chlamydia, and that usually makes them so they abort lambs right before lambing, or they get weak lambs. Our vet had us feeding crumbles for like a week, once a month. I thought I fed them enough to take care of it, but apparently I didn't. I had some weak lambs, and between the weak lambs and the cold, I ended up with like a 40% lamb crop. Was not impressed. So I went back to May. I could lamb in the barn in May, get 130, 140% lamb crop. I don't mind lambing in the barn, but you're spending 3 weeks in May when you should be out doing something else, and you're feeding hay to something that should be out grazing. So about 10 years ago, when I finally got smart enough to quit calving in March and move my calving to May, I moved the lambing up to the last week in March and the first couple weeks in April. First year, it didn't go too bad. It was a little cold, but things were going okay. But then my mother got sick and ended up passing away during lambing, so I wasn't around a lot. When you're not there, things die. But the next year, she was beautiful weather. It was 50 above, 20s at night. Couldn't hardly kill a sheep. I weaned 150% lamb crop of 110-pound lambs. I thought I had something figured out. Next year, just the exact opposite. Below zero every night, 20s during the day, cold, wet, damp. I couldn't hardly keep nothing alive no matter how hard I worked. I had about a 70% lamb crop. I could never do that again. But I didn't want to go back to May. But my cousins, they'd went to pasture lambing in June that year. I hated to lose the control, but I figured I had to try something. So the first year, I turned the bucks out on New Year's Eve day, which gets you about that last week in May, which is a little too early for northern North Dakota because how many Memorial Day weekends does it rain or snow or something? That's not good on lambs. Anyways, I couldn't give up all the control. I built about 6 jug pens on skids out of pallets. And anyways, so when the ewes started lambing, I'd go out there and I'd grab the twins and stick them in a jug pen. I could move them around pretty easy. The only problem was when you're breeding that late in the season, the sheep, they start cycling like late August, and they're pretty good up until December. But it seems like when the days start getting a hair longer, they just don't cycle as good. And I had about 40 ewes that didn't breed that year. Wasn't a complete wreck. I still ended up with a 80-some% lamb crop, which was better than I did the year before in the barn. But so the next year, I figured I'd try her again. Well, I'd had a heck of a calving season that year. The heifer bulls were not. And I blew out what was left of my poor back. Anyways, but I had to stick to the plan. So the first ewes that lambed, I drove out there, grabbed a hold of the first lamb, went grab a hold of the second lamb. I thought somebody shot me in the back. I heard a pop. I went down. Still don't remember how I got home. I was in a walker or canes for the next few weeks and couldn't do hardly anything other than drive through the sheep. You know what? Them sheep can do it on their own. I was working too hard for nothing. So now I turned the bucks out the 6th of January. I put them on a fresh quarter on the 1st of June. They start lambing the 2nd of June. I drive out there 3, maybe 4 times a day, feed the dogs. Every once in a while, I got to pull a lamb, not very often. There's a dead lamb or two you got to clean up. I mean, something always dies. It's best to make a trip around the pasture because ewes never stop moving, even as they're lambing. And if ewes are such a herd animal, they'll get up and run off sometimes. And if you pick up the lamb, take it back to the herd, I'd say at least 3/4 of the times they find their mom. So it's really nothing to it. I weaned up to 110% in June. Usually it's around 100. And I sold 80-pound lambs. This year they were only 77, but I'd had to wean them 3 weeks early. I think it works pretty good. I usually work the lambs like the first part of July. I usually give the ewes a CD&T shot about 2 or 3 weeks before lambing, hopefully to give the ewes lambs some immunity through the milk because you can't catch them and give them a shot. And you always lose lambs to overeating, so it's best to try. Anyways, and then when I work lambs, I give them another shot. I hate bands. A lot of people band their tails. This is a cauterizer docker. This is the greatest thing. They don't hardly ever kick or squirm. You put a band on a tail of a lamb, they'll lay there for 10, 15 minutes and scream. Not a fan. Okay, that's Bubba and Clyde. Clyde's the new guy. But coyotes. Lost a lot of lambs to coyotes. First year I had them, I locked them up every night, and I still lost 20-some lambs because the coyotes would come and kill at 10 o'clock in the morning. Coyotes are smart. I got my first dog that next year, and he was the smartest dog ever. I lost 11 lambs in the next 12 years, and I lost 10 one night. He ran into a mountain lion and scared the crap out of him. And he couldn't even chase coyotes off for a month. But I ended up bringing the ewes home and weaning the lambs. But then he got his gumption back. I had 4 dogs in a row that started running. One died, the other three I had to put down. They spent more time at the neighbors. One year, neighbor to the north didn't hardly lose any lambs. I lost 20 some because my dogs were up there all the time. Didn't do me much good. Bubba's been a really good dog, but he's got hip dysplasia, 3 years old, which they're not supposed to get till they're 5 or 6 at least. But I got him on CBD oil, just like me, and he's doing pretty good now. That's why I figured I better get Clyde as a backup. As you can see, he's pretty vicious. I know a lot of people have tried llamas and donkeys with some success, but a lot of them don't work. But like I said, not every dog works either. We're very fortunate. We have a really good government hunter, predator control guy. He works really good on the coyotes. I know people say that some coyotes don't kill, but it seems like in this country, eventually they'll all start killing. I know the Kronbergs, they put them in them netting all the time, and that keeps the coyotes away. But on my place, that's just not something I can do. My land's just not good enough, and I'd have to move fences 20 times a day. So worms kill more ewes than any other predators. When I first got the sheep, I wormed 3 times a year like everybody else did. That's what you were supposed to do. But eventually, these worms are becoming immune to most all wormers. There's only a couple of them that still work, and most of them not very good. I've been trying to cut back on the worming, mainly using rotation, because if I put the sheep in a pasture for like 2 weeks and then get them out of there and don't come back for like 6 weeks, and then the worms will pretty much be gone. I feed a low copper mineral. That seems to help. Copper usually seems to help a lot with worms in the cows too. But you got to be really careful with sheep and copper, because they retain copper so easily in their liver that you can poison them. I know of it happening. But my forages are so short on copper, and everything is so high in iron that ties up all the copper, that I feed quite a bit of copper to my sheep. One year I'd wormed the ewes, and I don't even remember what I'd used, using the lambs, and the lambs got tapeworms. Tapeworms very seldom ever bother the ewes, they bother the lambs. But anyways, I hated to run the sheep back through again and worm them again, and I'd read where somebody tried apple cider vinegar. I think it was Will Winter was talking about it. And so I went to town, bought some apple cider vinegar in the grocery store, dumped it in the tank, and a week later, they were cleared up. So I've been a big believer in apple cider vinegar. I got a 50-gallon barrel sitting in my kitchen, so that I give to the sheep and the cows for worms, for digestion, and lots of other things. It's the barber pole worm that usually affects the ewes. And like I said, that one doesn't affect the lambs, but I haven't wormed now for 3 years. The last time I wormed, that was 4 years ago. I wormed the ones that got wormy. And I didn't catch most of them in time because they started getting bottle jaw. But I did save some of them. They call it famacha. If you flip the sheep up, you can look under and pull their eyelid down. You can look, and if they're dark red, and then they're not wormy. And they'll have like 5 different colors. You have to look it up online. But anyways, it's a good way to tell if your sheep are wormy. Like I said, no, I haven't wormed them for 3 years. And they're doing pretty good for them. I don't think I've lost anything to worms, but there's some plants that help also. I got some absinthe wormwood in the yard. Most everybody does have some somewhere. I bring the sheep home every 6-8 weeks or whatever, and they'll eat a little absinthe wormwood, and that seems to help. Like I said, the oak trees, the oak leaves, and the acorns, but we don't get acorns every year. That's a pretty good wormer. I've tried diatomaceous earth. It's a flour made from seashells or whatever, and it's supposed to work for worms, but it's such a mess. I just kind of quit trying that. Anyway, so well, there's some of my cows. My cows are Angus, little Hereford influence. Like I said, I calf in May. Nothing's born on my place in a month with an R in it. I hate calf. I ain't gonna calf in the winter anymore or lamb. I wean late October. I push my cows pretty hard, so I don't leave the calves on too long. I sell some steers in January. I grass the rest. I breed all my heifers for only 22 days. I've been doing that now for 5 years. That's just an amazing thing. I'll never go back to breeding any longer for the heifers. I get anywhere from 60% up to 72% of them bred. They're supposed to be more fertile, and you're done calving. And I've been done calving in 2 weeks. You know, it just works so good. I breed the cows for a lot. I just turn the bulls are out for like 90 days with the cows, but by the time the vet ultrasounds, it's like a 65-day breeding season. So that way I don't have to fight with the bulls. I have been having some problems getting heifers rebred. I talked to a lot of people that are too. I don't know if it's because I run the heifers with the cows. And like I said, I do push these cows quite a bit in the fall and the winter. They got to earn a living. So this year I'm running my first calf heifers with my yearlings, my last year's calves. So they're getting a little better hay. They are getting a little bit of oats and a little bit of wheat mids, but they're not getting fed too much. They're still having to walk quite a ways. Yes, my only hobby is electric fencing. Kind of an addiction, really. I really like my electric fencing. I spend way too much time in catalogs, online, looking for what's new. I've tried most all of it. When I first started out, it was the black and yellow stuff that I bought in the hardware store, that poly wire, that's crap. I even had a break coming off a new roll one time. I used them little metal posts with the triangle welded on them that you had to pound in with little yellow insulators. Yeah, they're crap. They're all gone. And I had the little, I thought something that said it was a 10-mile fencer, it was a good fencer, but yeah, it runs 1,000 volts. Now the speed rights I use now are 10, 11,000 volts. How this will work. Okay, this is my favorite post. This is a Premier Pigtail. They got a big heavy coating on there. They're a really tough post. You can't hardly bend them, and they're pointed. You can hit these with a hammer. I learned that from Steve Kenyon a while back for one of his speeches. And you can pound them into frozen ground. They're just tougher than heck. And I really like them.
Robbie, can you put the end of that up closer?
See it?
Okay. There. Yep.
Yeah, they're both of them are pointed.
Okay.
Here's the ones that I bought first. They're not pointed. They got that big foot in there and sand, they don't go in. And this cheap little thing burns out pretty quick. They're not worth much. Listen to Greg Judy, which I do a lot. He always talks about these original treadle lines. So I bought some of these. I'm not a fan because when I move fences, I usually strip graze, so I'm putting a lot of pressure on the posts, and these things can't take the pressure. And if you don't get them all the way in the ground, they'll turn and lose the wire. But I mean, I use them, but I got to run out of pigtails first. Not a mess. I bought these from PowerFlex a year or so before I got them. They're crap. These hooks break off. They were broke off in the box when I got them. I should have drove back to Missouri. This is what Gallagher is really pushing now. This is their split ring post. They're not a bad post, but they're not near as strong as the pigtails. And they're not pointed. Everybody says, well, you can sharpen them. I don't know why the companies don't sharpen them. And this is a pretty big thing to shove into hard ground. Another little thing about them is the split ring is on the bottom, and that should be on the top in my estimation, or whatever. Because if you don't get this foot in the ground and they got a little pressure on them, that thing will turn. And it being on the bottom, the wire will fall out, short out your whole system. I use these a lot in the wintertime. This is just a fiberglass post that's coated in plastic. I glue a little chunk of tubing on top so I can hit them with a hammer. This fall, well, it's so dry this winter that I can pound these in because we got no frost yet. But usually I use, in the wintertime, I use a 1/2-inch masonry bit, about yay long, and then I can drill down with them. These are little Gallagher clips. I really like them. You can get these posts most anywhere, but I really like them clips. I like this poly wire. This is this is Premier poly wire. It's really reasonable. It's supposed to have a 5-year life. I haven't bought any in like 8. It'll still run a heck of a shock. But the only problem is with my fencer, I get this remote with a speed ride fencer, and my remote's at home, and I can run. I got fences running 2 miles or better away from home, and you can, if you need any problem, you just shut it off. But if you got too many breaks in your poly wire, it won't send the signal back. But that worked out pretty good this summer because I was out walking and this wouldn't shut it off. And I tried to move the wire hot. And that was stupid because it was running 9,000 volts and I got zapped a couple times in the belly. I got quite a bit of insulation, but not that much. Anyways, I had to walk back to my pickup to go to a shut off to shut her off. And I found whole dirt coming up out of the manure pads. So I knew I had tunneler dung beetles. I called up a friend of mine who's a retired entomologist from Willow City. He actually worked for the Smithsonian. He studied, he was all over the world studying dung beetles. Anyways, and he come down that afternoon and we found 2 tunnelers. There's a native and an import, comes from Europe or Asia. And then he started digging through some more, and we flipped over another manure path, and there were 7 rollers. And he always told me that if you ever see a roller, you call me, but you'll never see one. Well, I must be doing something right if these rollers showed up. We found a few more, and we were both pretty excited. We got a lot of dwellers. Of course, they kind of shorted out this summer because it was so dry. But I'm pretty excited about what I found so far. This is a Gallagher reel. This is by far the best reel I've ever found. They got a really good lock on them that won't come off. They got 3 hooks on them, so you can hang them on any fence, and they won't go side to side and shoot off because if you touch a barbed wire fence, of course, you're shorting everything out. And they got a good reel guide. Some of these come without a reel guide. And then when you're rolling them up, and pretty soon you got them around the handle. I've smashed most of the ones that I owned that didn't have a reel guide on because they annoyed me and I never wanted to use them again. I've tried a few of the cheaper ones too. They don't work. I guess these are expensive, but they work. And the gearing in these is like 2.75, where the O'Briens are 3. And these are the mega reels that I have. They won't hold a 1/2 mile. None of them will. They say they will, but it'll fall off and go around the handle. But this one, I can roll up a lot of fence really quick, where with the ones that are 3-to-1 geared, you really got to work to get them working. I mean, you got to walk. You just can't roll up a 1/4 mile standing in one spot. Let's see. Them are tumble wheels, Gallagher tumble wheels. I bought them a few years ago. Yeah, they're not cheap, but they do work. I don't have any here because they're out in my bale grazing right now. And they're work pretty well for winter time because you don't have to worry about putting a hole in the ground. I used them here last fall because it was so dang dry I couldn't hardly get a post in the ground. And I dare you to see which side of this fence was grazed and which wasn't, because this is really high ground and it really sucks. This is the side that was grazed. This wasn't. These tumble wheels, there's a plate in there, and when that drops down, and then these two legs will be off and these four will be on. But it's a little tight, and I don't know, but my speed ride fencers, they'll shock through them. They'll jump that. So whenever I'm using them, you can usually hear them clicking, but it doesn't seem to hurt too much. Like I said, these remotes, I mean, you can find your weak spot really easy. I swear by these things. I need to get some more permanent fences up so I can run off. I've only got like 1.5 miles of permanent, and then I work off of there for all my strip grazing. I know this winter we were down in Medora and they were talking about the virtual fencing. I said, I don't want to do nothing like that because I like spending time with my cows. I enjoy moving fences. I could use the exercise. I like spending time out there. I find dung beetles. Me and Trish were talking about dung flies yesterday. I just like looking around. I strip graze, just move the fences ahead, as I said, and then I put a back fence up, but it doesn't get moved that often because the cows very seldom will ever go back to back graze until something regrows. And that doesn't grow. It doesn't grow too fast in the sand. I usually move cows twice a day in the summertime, and the heifers or the yearlings once. It takes me an hour or so, but like I said, to me, that's fun. When I'm calving, I usually walk the fence ahead 3 times a day, but then I'm out there more. And when I'm calving, I really leave a big area so the cows can go back and find their calves. Seems to work pretty good. With the cows, I usually run 60 to 80,000 pounds per acre. Sometimes, like in the hog wallows, I do 120,000. I try to put as much litter down as possible because in the sand, I need water holding capacity. And but it's kind of hard to do when you got bluegrass that's only 6 inches tall and other stuff that doesn't grow very tall. Sand seems to kind of eat up my litter anyways, and the organic matter, I've never tested it, but I'm guessing it's not very much because it's just sand. I'm trying to reduce the bluegrass in some pastures by grazing really early. I've got one pasture that's 60 acres. I actually hay the other 120 acres of it, most of, or 100 acres of it. Yeah. And I just kind of left it because it wasn't worth haying, and I really didn't have a very good fence around it. Well, that's the worst thing you can do with bluegrass. It just took over completely, and there was nothing there. So years ago, when I was still calving in March, one spring I was running low on hay, and in late April, so I put the cows over there, put up some temporary fences, and they cleaned up the bluegrass, and then I left her sit. And I did that for a few years until I quit calving in March and went to May. Now I put my bulls over there like even late March, early April. And it is amazing what that does. They're beating up the bluegrass and grazing it or getting it down. I get them off there the 1st of June. The seed bank in this country is amazing. I know I see Bruce Knudsen was on here one time. He come out and he was looking around. He said, "You don't have any topsoil, do you?" And I said, "No, not really, not in the high ground." But I've got patches coming up out there now of furry sandreed, sand blue stem, Indian grass. Well, Trish, you've seen it. There is some cool seasons, mostly warm seasons. I'm also getting a lot of lead plant, silky prairie clover, purple prairie clover, wild licorice, a lot of plants coming back from the seed bank. I'm just amazed by what I find growing out there all the time. I got a couple more quarters that I'm really working on by grazing them really early and letting them rest the rest of the year. I usually only hit everything once, except for like that lower ground, that stuff that really grows grass. When you graze cows at really fairly high densities, I'm not a mob grazer. It's just, I call it high density grazing. And they get very non-selective. They will take a bite out of most everything. In the spring, when the spurge is coming up out of the ground and hasn't headed out yet, my cows will just nail it. I mean, they're not hungry. It's just they eat what's there. I know this spring, Jenna Block from Hedinger was up with Rachel, our county agent, and I was moving fences as we were doing things, and she said, "Your cows are eating milkweed." And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Your cows are not supposed to eat milkweed. It's poisonous." I said, "Apparently not. If they eat a little bit of it, it must be fine. Maybe it helps with the worms. I don't know. You know, my cows will eat chokecherry leaves. That's supposed to be poisonous. My cows will eat oak leaves. You know, everybody else calls this wild licorice cockleburrs up here because it gets the small burrs on it. My cows just nail it. It's a legume. It's a good plant, but I mean, most everything is edible. Brush, I'm having a hard time with brush, but I'm working on it. I just figure my cows eat a little bit of everything. It doesn't hurt. I try to get them to eat the best and stomp on the rest. And we move here. Okay, this is windrow grazing. This is my favorite kind of hand. I mow, rake, I'm done. This pasture is about 80 acres. It's all split up in like 20-acre paddocks, and then I move temporary fences. Here's the cows eating windrows. This year, of course, we haven't had no snow, so there's no problem. But these cows grew up doing it. I've been windrow grazing for 15 years. And it's amazing. There could be 2 feet of snow or better out there. And them old cows can smell them windrows. They walk up to them. They put their head down. They start going side to side. They come up with green hay. There's another picture of them. My cows we're done windrow grazing now. They're bale grazing now, but everybody's seen pictures of bale grazing. If you ever hear any of Greg Judy's speeches, one of the main things he says is don't name your cows. This is Lil. Lil has had 2 calves in 6 years. Don't name your cows. Thank you.
Oh, Robbie, I shouldn't have drank when you were talking.
I was worried about that.
Well, I didn't have anything come out my nose, so we're good. I'm gonna start. I've got some questions here that popped up on the chat, so I'm gonna start with them. I'm gonna go back here. Just let me scroll back quick. The first one was, do you have fly strike with June lambing? When we did June lambing, the flies got the lambs.
Not a lot of problems. I try not to use any insecticides, but when we work lambs in June, I do put a little bit of stuff in the pine tar that I put on the tails. I've had problems with on the tails, but other than that, not really. But then if you look at all my dung beetles, all my birds, I've also put up tree swallow houses this year. I put up 6 tree swallow houses. I had a pair of trees. I had a pair in each one of them within 2 days. You know, cowbirds will follow the sheep. You know, I just don't have a lot of problems with flies anymore. So no, but
Okay. Here's one from Bruce. Have you tried grazing the sheep and cattle together?
uh no. The guard dogs and the cows don't always work very good together. Like later in the year, I might end up doing it, but and then I feed such a high copper mineral to my cows, so I have to put that up in a higher feeder so the sheep can't reach it, which I have done, but it's kind of a pain in the butt. Uh, I used to do it before I got dogs, and it did help with the coyotes because the cows would keep the coyotes out. First year or so, whenever I did that, I had no problem with coyotes. But as soon as I had to move the cows, coyotes moved in that night. But now, for the most part, no, the cows are different. They're all in different pastures.
Just to expand on that a little bit, I know you and I talked about this yesterday a little, but do you have a certain sequence as far as sheep before cattle, cattle before sheep? You
Not
want to talk a little
really.
bit about that?
Early spring before lambing, like I said, I try to move them around. Would try to get some of the spurge grazed off before I, because when you're lambing, of course, you can't move them for that first couple weeks, and that first move is a pain in the butt because them lambs won't move, and then you got sometimes it takes me a whole day to move the sheep through the first fence. Then sometimes I go across the road and that just don't work at all. I had a lamb 3/4 of a mile away running south this year, and I finally caught him. But anyways, so I try to, like I said, the cows go on the pastures early that have more bluegrass on them. I usually try to put the sheep up in the bigger hills first, and then I come down into a pasture with not that many trees on it, so for lambing. So, and then I just go wherever because the cows will be someplace for like a month on a quarter or 3 weeks, where the sheep will only be there for 2 weeks. So, so I got to move around quite a bit. But
Okay. Um, Here's another one. When you graze at higher densities, does the Kentucky bluegrass root mass get broken up on sand?
it doesn't, I don't have, with sand, they don't have a lot of roots. They just, bluegrass don't go down very far. And I don't have a lot of problems with that because it's just not that much of a root mass. I suppose if it was on better ground, I know I hear a lot of people talk about they get way too much litter, from Kentucky bluegrass and the roots, which I just don't see. But sand's a different animal than most people's places.
Okay. I did have one of the gentlemen, because of, having your screen on here and shared, that makes you really tiny. So he was wondering, and I was thinking what we could do is I'll unshare your screen if we don't need to see the photos anymore. And then he was wondering if you could bring your electric fencing posts back up, kind of talk about those just a little bit again, so that kind of to see your favorites and which ones to kind of stay away from.
You're gonna have to do that. So.
Okay, I got you. I got you here. So I think let me make sure here. If you want to be able to see Robbie in as big a view as you can, in the upper right-hand portion of your screen, there should be a button that says view. And if you go to that, if you select the speaker view, that will make all of the participants small and Robbie large. And that'll help. So I have you set, but if you want to go ahead and bring those back up and kind of explain which ones I guess that you prefer and like the best.
And they see better then?
Yep, that one I think. Yep, I can see it. As long as they get that speaker view, I think you're good. So, and what
Yeah.
was the brand on this one?
This is the Premier out of Iowa. I buy a lot of stuff out of Premier. They seem to be, they test things. They just don't run one company. They deal with a lot of different companies. I don't know who makes these. Like I said, Steve Kenyon talks about pounding these in because he has the PFI posts. I think they're the same thing because they're built about the same as the pictures that I've seen. But like I said, this pigtail is pretty. I mean, it's pretty stout. Yes, they do crack, and I've been trying a few different things to fix some of them. But this is a newer one. Some of the older ones are had a little, they crack a little easier. But these new ones have been pretty good. But like these are probably 5 or 6 years old too. I really haven't bought much in the last few years because I guess
So
I bought pretty good stuff. Huh?
What have you tried? What have you tried for fixing on them?
I've wrapped that tape around them. What's the stuff you can put on a boat?
Oh, I don't know what that's called, but I know what you're talking about.
I got the liquid now, but I haven't tried it yet.
Okay.
Flex
tape. Somebody's saying.
Thank you. Yep.
Yes.
And and that did help. But I mean, it is tape. It moved, but like I said, you just got it. I mean, and yeah, I mean, if you run as big a fencers as me, you don't want to touch that because right at the top right there, if you grab a hold of that, that hurts. I've got enough shocks, but like I said, my fencers run 9, 10, 11,000 volts. So, but like I said, I use these in the wintertime. I'm using these right now. These are the plastic coated fiberglass posts. And because my heifers, I'm bale grazing my yearlings and my coming 2-year-olds. And it's so dry that they were just walking through a 9,000 volt fence. Wasn't even shocking them. So I had to put a ground wire on. I put another set of clips on, and that stopped them. Now they're getting a pretty good shock. But yeah, this is a Premier one. These are more pointed than I got both Gallagher and the Premier ones. But these are pointed where the Gallagher one's a little blunter, but they still go in the ground pretty good. And like I said, usually in the wintertime I use a bit anyways, but I don't know.
Michael Fettig was just commenting. He said, we've used the Flex spray and Flex shot on our pigtails. Works for a short time, but after it dries out, it will peel off, is what he was saying.
Okay. Like I said, I haven't tried the liquid yet. But.
Okay. Let's see. We got another question that came in. Have you tried the sheep as a brush control? We have done it in August. They ate the wolf willow first, then the grass, and then snowberry.
Yeah, some. And I would like to try to get something set up so I can night pen them, but I just haven't got around to it yet. I mean, I've talked to several people who use the netting. That's a lot of work, but and I know they eat some brush, but it's just not enough. And I mean, the cows will eat some brush too, but they don't eat enough. And I don't want goats. I got a neighbor who's running 150 goats, and he just bought them 4 brush control, and they're doing a good job. But goats, no, thank you. Sheep are bad enough.
Another question: where are you selling your lambs?
We're pretty fortunate. Dave Bosco's his name. He runs a lamb feedlot north of Winemere, and he comes up to Towner. So it's only 15 miles, and he gives us a pretty decent price. Because otherwise, I mean, we got to go to Bowman now because West Fargo closed. So Bowman's the next closest. Aberdeen, I mean, it's a long ways to go. So we're pretty fortunate with the wool, except for this year too, because my cousins up the road, they got 1,200 head of sheep. And so growing wolves out of Illinois will bring a truck up, and I got to go 4 miles. And then we load the wool up in the truck. They ship it back to Illinois. They weigh it, grade it, send us a check. But like I said, this year, they're still sitting on last year's wool, and they were only offering $1 this year. So like I said, I'm sitting on it. I'm hoping for good things, but who knows?
Okay, so I'm not a sheep person, and obviously Larry figured that out after he was asking his fly strike question, and I had to ask him what that was.
Oh,
But anyway, so like the wool that you have stored, do you have to store that anyway special? I mean, to
it's
do
just
things
in
get
my barn
into it?
underneath a bunch of tarps. So
Okay, so you don't have to worry about anything getting into it. And
I had a neighbor, Darwin Moen. You remember Darwin?
Mhm.
Lived 2 miles down the road. He sold out of sheep about 10 years before I got into sheep. And he was helping me shear one spring. And he was talking to Hillary, our sheep shearer, that he had some wool in the barn. And Hillary said, "Well, try to sell it." He said, "It's been in the barn for 10 years. Bags are tore." We went down, took some bags down there, shoved it in some other bags, sold it. He got good money for it. He got just about as much money as I got for mine. So, I mean, it was dirty, but
Yeah.
apparently it was fine. So,
Okay. I was just curious. Um, and Pete just commented too. He just said, keep it off the ground and it'll keep. So,
yeah, I
um,
got tarps underneath it and tarps on top of it. And
yeah. Another thing too that he mentioned earlier when we were talking about the pigtail posts is maybe trying like an epoxy or something. So it might be worth a shot. I know we have some where we've had the wire too tight and then it's rubbed, which are the ones you're talking about that are blunt tipped, and um, they've rubbed enough that they're through to the metal. And I keep thinking to
yeah,
myself, I'm like, okay, there's got to be a way to fix these things, but I haven't done much experimenting yet.
I also use that aircraft cable some. Like I said,
Okay.
I usually use that. So when that'll really rub a hole through a pigtail quick, because it's more abrasive. I mean,
Right.
I like that aircraft cable, but it's heavy, and I just use it for semi-permanent fences. And then, like I said, I like it for the tumble wheels.
Yeah. Let's see here. What else did I write down? Oh, we talked about this yesterday a little bit too with your tumble wheels. You said you're using them now for bale grazing, right?
Yep.
And like, how far can you talk about the distance that you can put between those when you're using them?
Oh, I got them like 50 feet, 50, 60 feet apart, I suppose, right now.
Okay.
I got 10 of them. That'll do a eighth of a mile, pretty easy. It's stretching it on a quarter of a mile. Usually if I try a quarter mile, I got to stick a couple pigtail posts in also. So I usually don't even try that. But
Okay. Um, Another question I had while you were talking about, moving your fences forward while you were lambing and stuff. Do you use back fencing at all, or you just forget about that?
when I'm calving,
Yeah, calving or lambing.
oh, well, I don't move any fences with the sheep. So
Okay. Okay.
uh, I, like I said, I usually move a fence. I usually put the back fence up once a week. I'll move it, during the summer. When I'm calving, I'll usually start on like 40 acres, and then I'll go all the way across that 40. And then, and then I'll move to the next 40 on that quarter. Then I'll lock, then I'll close off that so they can't go back on that. But I guess
Okay.
I'm trying to get them to beat up the bluegrass. So I want them to go back if it regrows. And then hopefully there's stuff coming from the seed bank and fill in and do a little better. But
Right. Um, Speaking of the tumble wheels, are you using polywire in those?
like I said, I usually use the cable because they well fray the poly wire. I mean, they are plastic. They got plastic covers on them, but just they'll vibrate in the wind, and they will wear some of the plastic off. I guess I do got 5 of them on poly wire right now. because I didn't have enough. My cable was, rest of my cable was in use, but I'd rather use cable because just for that. Maybe if you use the braided cable, the braided poly wire, maybe that'd be, but I don't have any of that stuff. That's pretty expensive, and I'm too tight. So.
What was another one I was going to ask you? Oh, I thought it was interesting when you were talking about cows and how they're balancing their diet and how, they were eating a little bit of milk weed and they were eating a little bit of chokecherry. And, but I think that goes back to, they're able to balance their diet if they have variety, available to them. It's when you have monocultures of things that when you start getting yourself into trouble with those types of things.
Yeah. No, like I said, they just take a little bite of everything and it seems to be fine, even if it is supposed to be poisonous. But I mean,
Right.
I don't have no really poisonous plants. I mean, I know there's other places that do, but I just,
Right. Here's another question that came in. Your tumbler dung beetles, or tunneler, I think it maybe is supposed to say, your tunneler dung beetles, how do you tell native from imports?
Robert, my friend, the entomologist, like I said, he come out here and showed me, and the native. Can you see my finger? the native tunneler was about the size of my fingernail on my pointer finger. It was it was darker, and then the import was about the size of my fingernail on my pinky finger. And then the tunneler or the roller was about the size of my thumbnail. So, I mean, none of them are very big, but that's, but that was just the way that I noticed that they were about that size. I tried to get pictures of them things, but they're so dang fast. I couldn't get my camera to work.
Yeah.
But
well, we were talking a little bit yesterday, like the common ones that we see a lot of are those kind of a red backed, I call them.
Yeah, the dwellers.
Or then those are the dwellers. But did you say, are those native or were those not native?
He said them are all introduced to.
Okay.
He said mainly it was the rollers that were following the buffalo around.
Okay. Yeah, because the other one that was common is they're black with some bronze on their back too.
Yeah.
And you had said that those were non-native too. So
yeah. Well, we did find a native one that ate everything. He said it even ate dung beetles. We found that up in a different pasture, but we only found one of them because we were looking for a different one. Because he said there is a native dung beetle that lives in deer poop, in shade, and he figured it would live in sheep too, because they're about the same. But they're so dry that it's got to be in shade because if the sun hits it, they're dried out. But we looked for a couple hours and we couldn't find any. But I found this other one. I was all excited. He just said, "Oh, that's this one." He wasn't worried. He wasn't too excited about it. But anyways.
Yeah. Another question. Oh, here's another comment that came off of Facebook too about the pigtail posts and fixing them. He's saying that mastic tape and shrink wrap over the pigtails works well. He says it turns a $3 post into a $3.50 post. So I don't know what mastic tape is, but I might have to look into that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good. I learned something too.
I did too. Well, good. Yeah, I'm gonna have to write that down. Let's see here. Another question. What's that?
I already am writing it down.
Okay. Yeah, mastic tape and shrink wrap is what he said.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see here. Experience. Do you have any experience interseeding legumes or anything else in predominantly tame grass pastures? Broadcasting it or seeding it, using the livestock to help seed it, anything like that you want to share?
I'm a big fan of Sicer milk veg. I mean, I try not to put it where I got natives coming, but where I got bluegrass. I don't have a lot of brome on my place, but I have some. But anyways, I got some Sicer milk veg 8, 10 years ago. I spread a couple 100 pounds of it out. I got a little spreader on my 4-wheeler, and I drug it. I don't know if a guy needed to or not. It took 3 years, but that stuff has taken over that higher ground where there was nothing growing before other than bluegrass. I tried Sandfoin. I got like 5 plants out of 300 pounds of seed. Not a lot of luck. Feeding seed into the mineral. A lot of people talk about that. I've been trying that for years. I'd say it's less than 5%. I don't know. I know you can't put it in a mineral with salt in it because the salt will make the seed inert. But and my mineral doesn't have any salt in it. But I don't know. It just hasn't worked that good. I've seen a few spots. I've had better luck feeding vetch hay. It seems like if I've had vetch hay, and then it'll grow through the manure. But I've spread some red clover with some success, some not. Like I said, with Sandfoin, I've drilled it, I've spread it, not much. Some sweet clover. Took a couple years for it to come, but I've had some come, but yeah. But mainly Sicer milk veg has been my main one. I tried some Falcata alfalfa last year, but I didn't get anything coming, but apparently it's like milk Sicer and it's a hard seed. So if we get some moisture, maybe it'll come. I don't know. I hope so. I've seen where that's a really good plant for really crappy ground, like a lot of what I have. So
your windrow grazing, do you fence that off into strips or do you let them free for all? How do you do that?
like I said, it's split up. I got permanent fences out there, 20 acres, 10 acres, whatever. Got to go around the trees and stuff. So, and if we don't have much snow, and then I move fences every other day. If we got a lot of snow, I don't worry about it too much because then the cows will go find it. And when they find a windrow, they usually eat that windrow. But that doesn't work if we don't have much snow. I started putting most of my windrows, I'm running them northwest, southeast. I've only had 2 wrecks with windrows, and they were 2 years in a row. 2 years ago, we had a big wind come through, and I had a bunch of Sicer milk veg out there. Excuse me. And big wet windrows, and that wind took them. And I mean, they were gone. I found them hanging in trees a half mile away. They were gone. Anyways, so then I figured, well, because I had them raked north and south. So I thought, well, if I run them with the wind, maybe that'll help. So I've been doing that the last few years. So I don't really cross very many windrows with the fences. I just move them, and like I said, my cows find them. And then fall before, when we had 7 inches of rain and 2.5 feet of snow in September and October, well, you know what that does to a windrow. I had a bunch of crap, and there was just nothing left. But that's the only year that's happened where it's been nothing. I mean, cows cleaned it up kind of, but I had to supplement them because there just wasn't enough there to keep them going. But other than that, it's been working really good.
Yeah. I'm going to open it up. If there's any questions that anybody wants to unmute themselves and ask, you're more than welcome to do that at any time here. I'm filling in with some questions that have come in off of Facebook Live and even some ones I've written down myself. So I don't know if the peanut gallery out in the kitchen's got any questions or not, but
I had put one in the chat there, I guess, because you were reading them so well. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I was wondering about the water. Do you
Oh,
use
yes,
different
I
water
saw that, Dave.
tanks?
Good.
Do you use different water tanks for your sheep and cows, or do you just what's your setup for water for the two different species?
Well, I was pretty fortunate. The previous owner put in these grain bin tanks, and they're not really hot, really very high. I mean, they hold like 4,000 gallons or whatever, you know, and them sheep will reach for water like crazy. I do carry a smaller tank, like one of them 75 gallon or whatever, so the lambs can reach. So every once in a while, I'll get a lamb jump in one of them, and yeah, you'll find a dead lamb in the big tanks. But I don't know why, but the sheep don't like drinking out of the little tanks. They'd rather reach the big ones. So I try to keep them full. They're all on windmills, but all my windmills are broke down. So I'm usually using gas pumps now. But so then I can usually keep them full all the time. So, but no, there's nothing really different. It just works. So.
Any other questions? Sorry about that, Dave. I did see that and I must have scrolled past it while I was looking for questions.
I do, if you can hear me.
Yep, I can hear you, Gene. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering if you do practice natural flushing with your sheep and with your livestock for a breeding program.
I usually do feed a little bit of grain to the sheep, wheat midge usually, to try to flush them. But this year couldn't get any wheat midge. So I had some alfalfa hay and the spurge hay, and I put a little bit of, I got a mineral that's got a little bit of protein in it for my cows. So I was putting some of that in with the salt as a added protein. And then I fed apple cider vinegar all the way through. That's how I guess I still am feeding. But for the sheep, because you know it's January. I mean, you gotta feed them pretty good to get them to flush. Cows I don't worry about because that's July. You know they're about as good as rip as they're gonna get. But the sheep I do grain. I try not to grain my cows, but sometimes when you can't get any hay, you got to do whatever you got to do.
Any other questions? Anybody would like to unmute themselves?
I got a question, Trish, for Rob. Rob, do you see any difference in your windrows where you've grazed the next year or years later in plant population or density or different species?
Usually the first year there's less growing there because there's still some litter. There's an enormous amount of manure in them. But usually the second year things will start coming back. And usually it's the natives that come back. I mean, they're the toughest ones there. And but if you get too much, I mean, it's got to be clean hay. If you go out and cut something that's been standing for a couple years, they're not going to eat it. I know because I've tried it. And I'm out there in April trying to pile up a bunch of crap so I can throw away. But for the most part, stuff comes back the second year really good. I've tried dragging them some, and most years I haven't. It don't seem to matter. But usually after a couple years, usually that's about the best spot in the pasture or in the hayfield or whatever after the windrows have grown. But usually comes back pretty good.
I know I learned tonight that I need to go back and read the instruction manual on my fence tester so I can shut it off from a long ways away.
If your polywire works, but
yeah, I didn't know it could do that till you started talking about it.
Oh.
So
now this thing's amazing. Yeah, mile and a half from home, off. Yep. But make sure you double check because I've done that where it didn't shut off the first time, and that hurts. So
I bet. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? We'll give them a second here. Any other questions?
thank you, Pete.
Robbie, you're still alive.
I made it.
You made it. Yes. Oh, here, I got another question on Facebook that just popped up. What fencer is it that you use?
I've got two speed rights, a 3 joule and a 6 joule. I bought the 6 joule because of this. The 3 joule does not work. This does not work on the 3 joule. I have one solar. I got that from Premier 10, 12 years ago. That was an IntelliShock, but they don't even make that one anymore. That thing is just scary. I mean, when they were putting in the fiber optics out here, I had that on a fence, and I didn't think the fiber optic crew was going to get there. And I come home and they were on this 80, and I didn't want to go talk to anybody. And then next morning they said, "What in the hell do you have hooked to that fence?" Because the guy put the gloves on that they can handle power lines with, and he said it burnt through them. So that's a pretty good fencer, but same thing happened here, only the crew leaned on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can hear Donnie busting a gut laughing out in the kitchen. So, oh boy. Yeah, there's some of them that they can get you pretty good. I got it out here in the front yard one day because somebody did not inform me that they had turned the fencer back on, and I was trying to set up a little electric fence for our horses, and it kind of knocked me on my butt, and I had to sit there for a little bit, and yeah.
One time that solar wouldn't work, and I changed fuses, I changed batteries, and it wouldn't work. I kept putting tester on it, it wouldn't work. So I drove the 3/4 of a mile to the end of the fence and grabbed a hold of it. Somebody turned it on. I don't know. I grabbed a hold of that. I got a metal reel made out of 7-bar L out of Manitoba. And that's what I got my cable on. So it was all metal that I grabbed. And when you grab something like that, oh my God, that hurts. I couldn't let go for the first 3 pulses, and then I couldn't use my hand for 2 days. But if you just bump them, it ain't bad. But boy, you grab them, don't do that. So I don't trust that thing very often.
Yeah, Donnie had to get his smart little comment in. He goes, "I told her she just wasn't listening to me." I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure you did not inform me of that. But anyway, well, I have enjoyed this evening very much. I wrote my new saying I wrote down for the night, and it's "eat the best and stomp on the rest." So there's a lot of truth to that, and it's a great motto when you're doing some intensive grazing, mob grazing, whatever it is you want to call it. And I think we've had a lot of comments, that you did a great job. So thank you for joining me. Just to give you a little update on where we're at for next week. On Tuesday evening, we have Dave Bauer joining us. He's one of our mentors as well. And then Thursday night, we have Dr. Rebecca Phillips on with us talking about carbon and methane, and that should be very interesting as well. So, Robbie, thank you for coming on with me. Thank you for being courageous and doing this. It was very fun, and you did a great job. So, with that, you survived. That's exactly right. Do you have any closing comments that you want to make?
No, thank you.
Okay. Well, with that, I think we're going to cut it off for the evening, and we'll hope to see you back on next Tuesday. So thanks, everybody, and have a good evening.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Great job, Rob.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.